Okay. So my presentation is about Indian potatoes, which are edible geophytes or bulbs, corms, plants with tap roots or rhizomes uh, that were dug and eaten by many, if not most, Native American cultures in California. So, as I just said, they're edible geophytes, but they were also a really rich, like, cultural element of many cultures. There were digging sticks that were used, and I don't know if they're necessarily developed for the digging of geophytes because it seems like they've been around in the archaeological record like across all human cultures. But they were certainly like heavily used, and patches where there were Indian potatoes were like really well manicured. And then over here on the right, I have a list of species that I got from this website and this book, Tending the Wild. Um, and it's kind of like blew me away how many different like varieties there were. Like I had known about white, I don't even know how to say it, Brodiea, and I'd known about blue dicks, but then there's just like so many different edible roots. So a little bit of botany. A geophyte is a plant that stores energy in its corms or bulbs. And basically, this is an adaptation to a Mediterranean climate. So, because we have long cold winters or short cold winters and long hot dry summers, storing carbohydrates and water and other nutrients in the bulb allows the plant to like die back once the hot season comes every year, and then just pop up from its bulb in the next season. So there was a lot of rich culture surrounding, as I mentioned. Um, I have a bunch of quotes from this Kat Anderson book, Tending the Wild, which I think we watched a video on it. I'm not sure if that's directly tied to the book or not. It doesn't have all the information, but it's an amazing book if anyone decides to read it. It has like so much information. Um, and this is my quote here to prove that they were indeed uh, an important food source for many cultures. Um, One reason that it's not often mentioned or brought up is that they're not very easily preserved in the archaeological record. It's a pretty like soft material, so unlike animal bones or acorn shells or seashells, they would break down pretty quickly. But there are people that believe that maybe these Indian potatoes rivaled acorns in terms of importance, and many of them actually contain more protein than even like the seeds that people would get from plants. And then this here is a little excerpt that was saying, like I thought it was kind of interesting, just because it kind of shows like this contrast between understanding and like appreciation, is that like gold miners and settlers would call the Indians diggers, and it was like kind of a racist term, and they would look down on them, and but then they would also like celebrate how beautiful this area was and how well kept these meadows were, and it was the diggers who were keeping this area so beautiful and it was so garden like because of the methods that they used to dig these geophytes. This here is a picture of, this is actually one of my favorite plants. Like if you go on a walk, you've seen this everywhere. If you look up soakroot, it's a really interesting plant. It's got these like little wavy, long wavy leaves. They're actually not that aesthetically pleasing, but they just like for some reason every time I see them, I just get like really excited. And this plant was used as a soap. It was used to poison fish, so they would trap fish into these weirs, and then they would throw a soap root bulb in there, and it would stun and poison the fish, but it wouldn't affect the meat, so you could still eat the fish after they were poisoned. Um, Also, there's like this on in the picture with the woman holding the soap root bulb. There's like that. It looks like the cocoa noir, whatever that stuff is called that you get for planting, and they can make it into brushes, really beautiful brushes. And young leaves were edible. And the bulbs, if you baked them for like 36 hours to get the soap properties out, were also edible. And this here is a picture, again, from Tending the Wild, describing like the ways of digging it. So if you left the root, this is one of the practices that I'll talk about later, of preserving the crop for future use, is if you break off the root at the very bottom of the bulb can grow back from that root. And then seeds would be put back into the hole. So in the next year, you can see in the picture, you have like 3 extra plants or 4 extra plants or whatever, which is like, it's kind of awesome that you just like, you took 1 and you get 4 the next year. Yeah, so that segues well into the benefits of the harvest. So there are many methods used to preserve, because there were a lot of different types of corms and bulbs. So, sorry, this thing is like kind of in the way. So it's similar to how we learned about fire ecologies. These plants were preserved in similar ways, and there was enough care and attention given to it, and enough passed down through generations. You'll see in the next slide that fire was also a method that they used. Actually, in this slide, sorry. So, individual plants were replanted. They were harvested after seed set. They would dig the bulbs and corms, and then they would replant them. They would deliberately break the stem above the root crown or the bulb. And there was a lot of other, I won't read this whole list. Yeah. So this is a quote, and it says, after the Yurok got done collecting bulbs and corms, they would go through and take all the ones off, like all the little ones off, and replant them. And this would ensure a continual supply. And this is a picture of, I think it's wild camas. I didn't put a label there. And you can see how these like little tiny bulbs, like if you have smaller ones, you would just set them aside and then stick them back in the ground. And the bulbs were eaten raw, they were boiled, they were roasted. A lot of times they were dried. They were actually specially designed earth ovens. This is not a picture of that earth oven. This is probably just some earth oven that people made in modern times. But I couldn't find any pictures of these Chumash earth ovens, but they were specially designed so that you could put like massive amounts of camas in there, and you could just bake them all at once. And the camas were actually important to be baked because they have a compound in it that's slightly toxic, which I can't remember the name. It's like inulin or something like that. Also, the bulbs were cooked for future use, or stored for winter months. Either they were cooked or they were dried. And there's 2 interesting quotes. One regionally I think is cool because it's from Joaquin Miller, and it says the Modoc roasted camas bulbs in the ground, kneading them into cakes, and dried them. In this state, they kept well and retained their sweetness and fine properties for months. I thought this was interesting because 1, I like spend so much time at Joaquin Miller Park, it's ridiculous. And 2, because it's really interesting to think about how people prepared for winter months, and how like something like this that can be dried and cooked, or something like acorn flour that can be stored, is really important, because there are seasons, even here, where it's like beautiful year round, where there is no food growing or very little food growing. And then another one, which the quote got to me, is this: Patrick Breen was a member of the Donner Party. And he wrote in his diary during that harsh winter that like it was like a solitary Indian passed by yesterday, come from the lake, had a heavy pack on his back, gave me 5 or 6 fruits resembling onions in shape, tasted like a sweet potato, all full of little tough fibers. And it kind of just like I cracked up when I read that, because I was like, I mean, this is like, there's a whole party of people who are like starving to death, and then like this one Native American person is just like kind of casually walking through with a heavy backpack from the lake, and this like is already prepared, already understands the ecology of this area so well that like it's not even a big deal, and these people are like eating each other. Yeah, and my works cited. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, Colin. Wonderful.